Not different.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, February 23rd meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission. We'll go ahead and start with a roll call. Chair Lisa Hanson, present. Vice Chair Jacob Miller,
Present.
Alder Jim Hutchinson,
Present.
Commissioner Darius Daniels,
Present.
Commissioner Ken Ravinsky,
Present.
Commissioner Emma Fullwilder, present, and Commissioner Kelsey Lutzo. Is that right? Is she up there?
Yep.
Okay.
Present.
Excellent, thank you. All right, moving on to approval of the agenda, for the Monday, February 23rd, 2026 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Daniels, second by Commissioner Ravinsky. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And moving on to approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes from the January 26th, 2026 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Fullwilder, second by Commissioner Ravinsky. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then moving on to regular business, and the first item is a public hearing. And this public hearing has been properly posted and public notification has been published in the Green Bay Press Times. The Plan Commission is interested in hearing public comments on the subject agenda items. We invite your comments and ask that you state your name, address, whether you represent a group or association, whether you favor, oppose, or only providing information, and your comments or concerns. We also ask that you confine your testimony to facts related to the proposal at hand and avoid repetitive testimony. City staff will provide a presentation during the public hearing, and questions raised by the public may be asked, but they will not be answered by staff until the upcoming actionable item. You must be recognized by the Plan Commission or to speak, and your comments must be addressed to the chair. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we will now open the public hearing on item number 1. Public hearing on a conditional use permit to allow a boarding house located at 633 East Walnut Street, submitted by Abby Brzezinski of the Jackie Nitschke Center property owner.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with us. Great evenings.
One.
Technology's being a hater today, so just give us a moment.
That's the machine that's. Someone bought.
Uh-oh.
Okay. You want to share the motion and
Okay.
where it goes.
As we can close out of it then. Sorry, everyone.
Put in there. Can you show me both?
Yeah.
I'm not it. It's close to
Your change back in place at the register.
Yeah, I was scared. Yeah, you. Trying to go as fast as possible, I swear.
Change.
Yeah, I still use cash. Sorry, my bad.
Big Miller hasn't touched cash in 20 years.
No, I got it.
You were, thank you. Like, I'm gonna rush me, you're gonna pay for this. But you're paying forward here.
Oh, no.
Oh, just trust me out there, that's at least $5. Yeah.
It's the big board. Is that right? Pressure. Like, don't know what.
Oops, excuse me. Let's try this.
You just wait.
Yeah, we knew it. We knew they were gonna do it.
We were just waiting.
Oh, you're waiting for us?
Yeah, now that you were rocking, it's right there.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, all right, let's try this again. So this is for a conditional use permit for 633 East Walnut. This is locally affectionately known as the Glass House, at the corner of East Walnut and North Quincy Street. The property has a future land use designation for downtown uses, and the current zoning is neighborhood commercial, which is in line with the conditional use permit request for both of those. So looking at this property, this is how it looks today. It's been vacant for a number of years. The Jack Nitschke Center bought it, I think 5 years ago now. Looking to kind of do an expansion of their services that they provide. If you're familiar with Jack Nitschke Center, they have a couple of buildings nearby and adjacent to this property. So this was just an expansion on their end. Looking to create a boarding house that would have some of their programming in it. So for clarifications purposes, there are definitely a lot of different community living arrangements that are allowed within the city, that are allowed within the state. But by the definition within our zoning code, we are considering this community living arrangement, which is similar to how you would view a dormitory. People who are not related, who can live together. There are certain common spaces that are required to be available, but it doesn't have any sort of programming that is naturally associated with it, any sort of programming spaces that are naturally associated with it. So from our definition from the zoning code, it's basically just group living. So with that, they are looking to do some additions onto the building to expand the capacity of said building. So looking here, this little gray area is the outline of the house as it stands. The blue areas are the addition areas. So obviously quite a large addition onto the back here, and then a small addition on the west side. We'll talk about this one a little bit further into the discussion, but generally speaking, looking to almost double the capacity of the building. This would allow for them to have up to 14 beds in the space, and then also those common rooms that we require, shared bathrooms, shared kitchen spaces, things like that. So this is what they are going for as far as a footprint is concerned. Looking at the renderings, again, this is a view of what it looks like now. So that blue expansion is the front blue expansion is the one shown here. Almost looks like an enclosed front porch, proposed to be at the same setback as the front porch that exists here. So it'd be off of this area here. And then looking at the side and back, obviously this is where that new expansion area would be. So generally speaking, keeping with some of the architectural features, such as the slope of the roof lines, things like that. This property is not on the National Register, nor is it eligible for listing on the National Register. So our Landmarks Commission has nothing to do with this. They are not required by municipal code to follow any of our preservation code. However, this is a very well-loved locally historic home. If you look at this house, people from here, people who live here think it's historic because of the nature of the home. So we definitely wanted to take a further look at that, especially with the building additions, to make sure that they weren't taking away from that integrity, that historical integrity. So we do have a section within your staff report that discusses some of that historical integrity. We had the Landmarks Commission staff look at these building additions, and there are some that are not quite in keeping with what we would normally look for, but they aren't terrible, you know. And with that not being eligible for listing, there's only so much that we want to, you know, maybe provide as a suggestion, but definitely not hold them to. However, in looking at this front, I don't know which the best view is going to be, probably this one. This front piece here, they have this building addition expanding up to where that front porch is. So as I think most of you are familiar with, when we talk about our front setbacks, we're talking about the front of the building. So porches are generally allowed to encroach within your setback area. Buildings are not. So with that, looking from our zoning code, we definitely wouldn't want this building addition to encroach up to where that porch is. But also looking at it from preservation standpoint, it would be a very noticeable change to the front facade of this building. So to have anything encroach further, like where this porch would be, further than this front facade line, isn't something that we're looking to have happen to this home. I think that there were like 4 major things that were listed in the staff report, and this is the only one that we're conditioning them on. We want them to keep the rest of it in mind, which they've done a very good job looking at a lot of the other features that they have on this parcel. But we certainly are hoping to keep the condition where they cannot expand this front facade area past the existing front facade into that porch area. That would impact them in the floor plan with removing one of these counseling rooms. So that's what's noted here. I know this is really hard to see from the small screen, but these 2 rooms here are listed as like open counseling rooms. Basically office space as far as we're concerned. So it would remove one of those spaces here, but it would, you know, mostly keep the floor plan intact. I know that there might be some opposition to that from the applicants. I do think that it's a reasonable request with the rest of the building kind of, you know, we want them to work with our staff and our zoning administrator in particular to make sure that the additions are really keeping in mind the historical integrity. But we feel very strongly about this one from a preservation standpoint, but also because of the zoning code from having that encroachment into the front area. So you'll notice that reflected in the conditions here. Other than that, the building, the materials, everything they're using are definitely agreeable with the existing structure and the structures around it. Other things that are particular to this use are the parking. Generally speaking, for a boarding house, we can treat it as a dormitory as part of our land use development standards. We can then from there extrapolate that a parking study can be done. This programming that they're putting into this boarding house has its residents have a vehicle requirement where they cannot bring their own personal vehicles to this program. It's a 28-day stay program. And without any of the residents having that, we were using the employee parking required for the boarding house to make that determination of parking. So that's also reflected in the conditions as part of this conditional use permit. We also have then listed that if the ownership or the program type were to change, that they would then have to address parking at that time. So really the reduction in parking is only offered because of the programming type that is allowed here. The programming is a requirement of the conditional use permit that they have to submit that. We have that on file, so if that were to change, they would have to update. And if it changes to any sort of a program or any sort of use that would have more of a parking need or parking capacity, they would have to increase that with an additional or an amendment to this conditional use permit. So all that is sort of listed in here, really just making sure that it's being used as a boarding house, that if the boarding house is being used for this programming, that will give them that reduction in the parking, noting that if that changes, that they'd have to come back before this body. We are also looking to make sure that an easement is in place. If you look at the site plan here, the parking area is back here. There's not a curb cut, and we prefer it that way. They're looking at doing access at the existing curb cut here. So we would need an access easement over here. They own this property. I'm sure they can get the access easement pretty easily. So I think that'll help unify it to have like more of a campus look. And we've already had some discussions that as they continue to grow and expand this campus area, that we may look at just doing a PUD over the whole area at some point. But at this point, we really only need the conditional use here for the use and then to amend some of those parking requirements for this use in particular. I think that's about it. Again, this is only to be used as a boarding house. It's a 28-day facility, 14 beds, and it has staffing 24/7. Any sort of the supportive programming that may be associated with people who think of Jackie Nitschke, those would be supplied at the existing buildings that they already have within this area. So that is what we have for now.
Okay. All right, so with this public hearing, we're looking to hear from anyone who would like to speak on this item. So come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. And keep your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Let the record reflect that no one came forward and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the corresponding actionable item, item number 2. Consideration with possible action on a conditional use permit to allow a boarding house located at 633 East Walnut Street, submitted by Abby Brzezinski of the Jackie Nitschke Center property owner.
Thank you. With that, we are recommending approval of the conditional use permit with the following conditions. Pretty standard language, any increase in beds or capacity requires an amendment to the CUP. This is for boarding house uses only. Any programming changes may require an amendment to the CUP if the programming falls outside of our definition of a boarding house. Exterior changes to the structure shall be approved by our zoning administrator, keeping the historic preservation principles in mind. No building addition shall extend past the front East Walnut building facade. On-street parking requirements shall be 2 spaces provided for every 3 employees at the largest shift. Any changes in ownership or program type that would increase vehicular needs, that would require a change. Oh, sorry, I thought you were looking at me like that.
No, actually.
And then the easement requirement, and then our blanketed statement that they have to comply with all of their municipal code.
Okay,
Motion to approve as recommended.
okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Revitsky and a second by Commissioner Fullwiler. Do you have any discussion or questions for staff?
I have a question regarding the requirement of not putting anything closer to the street. I noticed there's a building that is closer to the street than they're proposing, 2 doors away.
Yes.
So why isn't that being taken into account other than, the building looks good?
So I think you're talking about the building that's to the west.
Yeah.
Correct. Here, with the little vestibule in the front.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to make an assumption here, though I can't be sure without pulling up the permits, that was probably approved as a vestibule. I don't know when it was enclosed. It could have also been done in a different zoning code time. It could have been put up without someone realizing that they were putting that there. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why buildings end up looking how they do, especially in downtown. What we did to do the averaging, since this is an established block, we do the averages of the front setbacks. So we did of the 3 buildings, and I used the setback not counting this addition, because I made the assumption this was probably some sort of a porch, open entry location. I'm actually not even entirely sure if it's enclosed at this point. But even so if the zoning code, if we threw that right out the door and we weren't talking about the front setbacks, so with the preservation in mind, we really don't want to see that come forward. And then also when we look at building additions, we usually want them to keep the same setback planes, especially if we're that close to the front facade. We really don't want them to encroach any further. In NC, our setback for the front setback is 10 feet. This would not go into that area, even, well, I don't think with the addition. But we really want to see that same building plane, keep that established where it is, especially from a home that's this old. So not a great answer, but part of
Are
an
you
answer.
treating this, I guess. Are we treating this differently because it is semi-historical, or I wanna make sure. They're not, because we don't have to play by those rules, right?
Yeah.
And yet we seem to be playing by those rules for the setback, when you look at neighbors' building.
I don't think so. I think the discussion came up because it is locally thought of as historic. But it wouldn't pass a site plan test at this point if it just came through us through site plan. because it encroaches into that front setback area with the porch. We would have caught that from that perspective either way.
At the neighborhood meeting, there was one participant. And as far as the general objections, there really weren't any for use, it wasn't the issue. What came into play here was this building has historic nature to it. How do you keep historic features still progressed in the time, which for the most part has been done with what they put forward. But this is one part where staff recommends that there be adjustments to try to keep the porch and setbacks in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Most exciting question. It's a curb cut right near our home, right? On Quincy. On the site plan, it looks
This?
like that's no longer there. Yes.
Yes, they'll be removing that. Yes,
Are they going to be landscaping that area? I would assume too,
they would have to turn it back to green.
fair to green. Okay.
Because that's the public terrace. They would have a requirement to do some landscaping as the perimeter buffer of their parking lot in the back here. So there would be some more green added in this area. But this would be just turned back to green, I'm imagining. And then the city could put in street trees if they wanted to.
As long as it's being, as just a pad of concrete is,
No, that would be removed.
okay, good.
All right, well, we have a motion by Commissioner Ravinsky and a second by Commissioner Fullwild.
I don't think.
Alright.
No.
All right, so no further discussion? All right, we'll go ahead with the vote then. All those in favor,
Aye.
any opposed? All right, and then that will move forward to the next city council meeting, which
This
is
is third, March 3rd.
March 3rd. All right, moving on to item number 3, which is another public hearing. Public hearing on amendments to various sections of the Green Bay Municipal Code, chapter 44, related to food trucks and food truck assembly.
Thank you, Chair. So. Food trucks.
Yeah.
We have throughout the years of being on the planning staff received a couple of different requests to do different types of food truck assemblies. So in general, when you think of that, you think there are events that have a bunch of food trucks, there are parking lots that have food trucks, there are places that, you know, over the weekend, they put a bunch there and then they disappear by Monday. The clerk's code has specific regulations as it pertains to licensing mobile food establishments, where they can go, how they need to be licensed, hours of operations, those sorts of things. The zoning code has been silent on that though. We've looked at different parts of the code that maybe a food truck court could fall into. It doesn't totally fit. Some of them are like maybe outdoor recreation that doesn't really speak to the needs of what needs to be established for a food truck court. So we decided to go through with a text amendment to add some clarification on different types of assemblies and then our expectations for those types of assemblies. So this was done in conjunction with the clerk's office. I do believe the clerk is on if there are any questions regarding licensing. But we were really sure to make sure that our code pointed back to chapters 4 and 10 as needed, as far as describing them, licensing them, anything related to that would stay within those codes so that we don't have any overlapping or potentially conflicting information between them. So we decided to add some definitions to the zoning code. Number 1 being the mobile food court. This would be something that we're going to be looking at the most. This would have some land use provisions. It would be established as a permitted primary use on a parcel, where there are 3 or more food establishments that would stay there. It would be considered a permanent use. So there would be truck pads that would be established there. That would be the sole use of that property would be a mobile food court. I'm sure you guys have seen this in other cities. A lot of places have them where it's just like, that's what you do there. There are courts there. There might be places to sit, places to hang out, maybe a bar. So that's kind of what we had when we were envisioning, when we were trying to describe this. So this would be something that could exist on private property, it could be done on public property, but it would have to go through our process of a conditional use permit to establish it as a permanent structure. A mobile food congregation is kind of what we see now. You're driving past Family Video and they have a food truck sitting there. So right now it is allowed as an accessory use by right to have a food truck in a commercial parking lot because there's a primary use there that's considered an accessory use. We wanted to expand that a little bit to make sure that we had a solid definition for what is considered a congregation versus what's going to be next, which is a rally. The congregation, we should think of some words, okay? So we have for the congregation that if it's on public property or in the right of way, those are regulated through the clerk's office exclusively. So that's where you're thinking the ones that park on the road. You know, we want the clerks to have full control over hours of operation, where they can go, what they can establish.
Okay.
If it's on private property, thinking of a commercial lot of some sort. But this would be allowed as an accessory use in some of our districts. I'll go through the districts next. And it's only allowed if there's a primary principal use on that property and a parking lot is not considered a principal use. So even if it is in our zoning code, right? Downtown surface lot, you can do it. That is not considered a primary use for this. You have to have some sort of an established primary use in order to use this section of the code. We have it within our commercial mixed use and public institutional districts as accessory, and we do not have this listed as an accessory in other districts. So this would not be an allowed use within any of the other districts that we have. So I'm thinking residential primarily, we wouldn't want this to pop up somewhere residential. Also industrial, knowing that maybe somewhere in an industrial area, they might want to do something like this, they would have to go for something that's more of the mobile food rally. So that's where you're thinking 3 or more trucks, but it's something that's temporary in nature. If it is going to be a rally, they would either need a temporary use permit through us if it's on private property, or a special events permit, which is regulated already through the clerk's and mayor's office. So we really just wanted to give some specifics on what they're called, how many makes it each of these different definitions, and then who is going to be regulating that between the clerk's office and our office. So we think that we've accomplished this with these definitions and putting them within our code in the right spots. So we've expanded what can be an accessory use. It used to just be commercial. We've added the mixed use in the public institutional districts. We are establishing that a mobile food rally can be a temporary use permit with a code amendment here, and then adding these definitions in to make sure that we have a full understanding of what goes where. This is how we will be adjusting for those uses. So as discussed, the mobile food court is going to be a conditional use. There will be development standards that we'll go over next. So when we're talking about our mixed use, that's OR and C in both of our downtown districts. Commercial, C1, C2, C3, and then obviously public institutional is a standalone district. So this is, we're thinking our main commercial corridors, our downtown, are near downtown with that office residential. NC is kind of a random one that's kind of everywhere, but generally speaking, we don't zone at that unless we feel like it can hold a little bit more to that property. And then the mobile food congregation, which was that second one, expanding that accessory use, that it's just a permitted accessory use if there is a primary use in all of those zoning districts here. Those do not have development standards because they are temporary in nature. So the development standards that we're looking at, all of these are listed within the draft ordinance that was attached to your packet. Looking primarily at wanting to make sure that there are design criteria that are sort of woven into this to make sure that it's not like we're slapping up a plywood sign that says mobile food court and then people are just showing up. We want it to be more of an established use, which means it has to have these land use development standards. So the first one is requirement of a bathroom, not a porta potty, a permanent bathroom that would have to be on site. If we're trying to make this a commercial use, it has to have commercial amenities. And to us, that means you can wash your hands, you can go to the bathroom. There is some sort of a structure on site establishing that use. All of the trucks would have to have a hard surface to park on. So you can't just roll up on grass, tear up the grass and then leave. So this would give us a firm number of how many are going to be at each establishment. But again, it has to be 3 or more. We have how much seating is required per parking pad. So 1 table and 4 seats. All of them must be operable and not used for storage. We're definitely trying to make sure this isn't something where you have an old thing that you're like, oh, that's a food truck now. And then you're just sitting there and there's only storage in it. So really trying to keep in mind what could happen and really hoping for the best here. Has to have an active license per chapter 10, which is again through the clerk's office. With all of the different types of zoning districts that this is allowed in, we wanted to make sure that the floor area ratio doesn't exist for this, because we know that these buildings will primarily be smaller in nature. And there might just be a bathroom with a small storage area. Maybe there is no primary bar, there's no primary concession, there is just the food trucks and a place where someone can use the restroom. So making sure that that floor area ratio doesn't exist. And that there is no setback requirement for those parking pads. There would be for an accessory building, which is listed further down in here, but that the parking pads would be able to be established within that normal front setback area. Because we think of this like a patio or a porch, the truck may or may not be there. But that does not minimize the need for the parking or any sort of setback buffers that we have. So if it is going against any sort of adjacent residential use or district, it would still have that 25-foot buffer that's required that we have in our code. All of our other bulk requirements defined within the zoning code would still apply. So looking at impervious surface, things like that, height. At this point, we are not requiring fencing because we don't know what size of a lot this would establish on. This could be a larger lot, this could be a smaller lot, so we don't want to put an undue burden by having to fence it. However, if they do fence it, they have to follow the regulations in 44-451A, which is basically if your fence is all the way to the property line, it could be 3 feet tall. If it's, what am I looking for? How big? And then 4 feet, it basically steps it up. So that way this is a visual thing. You think of a residential fence, you can always see over or through it in some way, versus some of the commercial industrial ones that's 6 feet tall and it's right in front of your face. We don't want that look for this sort of a use. We want to make sure that it's a visually enticing play area. Moving on, hours of operation are limited to what the hours of operation are with their license. We've made the exception that if sorry, let me back that up. The hours of operation go until 10 p.m. except for in the downtown district, which is defined in chapter 10. So it's different than what we think of our downtown, not our downtown zoning district, this downtown operating district. They're usually allowed to go until 3 a.m. So we said, hey, that's okay, except for if it's adjacent to residentially zoned parcels. Because we, again, don't want to be burdening the neighbors in our downtown areas if it's a residentially zoned area. So we limited that back to 10 p.m. to match the rest of the city. Concerning signage, we would allow 1 pylon or monument sign per parcel and 1 wall sign if they have a permanent structure. We have definitely minimized the size of that sign, not to exceed 100 for the pylon or monument, not to exceed 50 for a wall. This is to hopefully not do a lot of like sign noise. We already think of these mobile food trucks as signs themselves because there are very few, if any, that are blank. They always have the logo, they have the name of the establishment. So this is really to give the owner of that food court to say, this is Jimmy's food court or whatever. But making sure that it doesn't overwhelm the site with a bunch of signage. And they're definitely allowed to do directory signs if they want to put Jimmy's food court and then some of the vendors like in a slide sign or something like that, that would be an allowed sign type. We just want to make sure that the sign is smaller than we would normally allow within our commercial districts. When we're talking about our accessory uses for this type of use, we're looking at storage. We understand that storage may be needed, but we're thinking 18 square feet per parking pad is probably sufficient if they wanted to do permanent storage. This again would have to be a building, not a shed that you bought at Menards. The 18 square feet, we kind of just guessed what size a closet was, like a bigger closet. So if we want to amend that, we certainly can. But we're just thinking it shouldn't be food storage related. These food trucks have their own requirements when it comes to food safety, food storage. This is napkins, paper towels, those sorts of things. We wanted to make sure that that was accounted for as an accessory use. And then the building itself, having that front setback, that it would basically either be greater to or equal to the averaging of the block. A lot of these are probably going to be in established neighborhoods already that have a vacant parcel in them. So that's what we're expecting most of them to be. But if there is no existing structures on that block, then it would just go back to its base zoning code. So whatever, wherever it's establishing to make sure it's still a safe feel. But that would only be for that accessory building. So we're thinking maybe like concession stand looking buildings. Maybe someone is gonna do something larger that has a larger indoor use that's associated with this. You know, we don't really have a good idea of what type of buildings might go with this. It could be a large variety of different types of buildings. So we wanted to just keep it a little bit more fluid, but understand that we don't want the building going right up to the property line in all of the districts. It's not appropriate in all of the districts. For parking, we are going to be using the outdoor recreational facility parking outline, which is that a parking study is to be done. Those are approved by our zoning administrator. Something that is different though is that we have written in that on-street parking within 500 feet can be used to offset that. So generally speaking, we're doing shared parking off-street, whatever. But we think that for this type of use, a lot of it is going to be that visual, I can park, taking into account the neighborhood, is there on-street parking, is it available on-street parking? So we wanted to write that in for this parking requirement, which is a little bit different than what we normally do. So those are the big things around this. I know I just threw a lot of words at you. I'm hoping that you read your staff report ahead of time. But that is all for now.
Okay. So now with this public hearing, we're looking to hear from anyone who would like to speak on this item. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one came forward and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the corresponding actionable item number 4. Consideration with possible action on amendments to various sections of the Green Bay Municipal Code, Chapter 44, related to food trucks and food truck assembly.
Thank you. We are recommending approval of this amendment based on your proposed draft ordinance that was in your packet.
So the food court, that's something like what is set up at the Tarleton,
That was under a temporary use permit, but yes, since
but that's something.
that's our guinea pig.
It's right. I figured that there was an idea. Okay.
Yes.
And then as far as the, what was it, the congregation?
Mhm.
That's just if a food truck pulls up at a gas station, Family Dollar.
Private property.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
So we would just want to make sure that we have a distinguish between what falls under the clerk's provision,
Right.
and what falls under ours.
And the rally is just as a special event. That's so that-
Yes. So in theory, none of these would come before you outside of the mobile food court, because that's an established use then.
Right. Oh, right. Because this number 2 would just go through the clerk. Right.
Mhm.
You don't see one.
You went right. 2 questions for you. Why? The first one is why? Why is this needed?
Because we don't have anything to cover a mobile food court right now. So that is what is coming out of the Tarleton lot. We have been discussing this with him for years at this point. We went through the alley closure process. And at first we were thinking, let's just try a PUD over it, but we received this request numerous times. Other areas have this already as part of their zoning code, and ours is just silent on it. So really, to us, it's more of a cleanup action. We're defining something we know people want to have as a use, so that way we can have the regulations for it up front.
Thank you. Second question, if a private company in downtown decided to have an employee event and scheduled 2 or 3 food trucks to go into private property for their employees, they would be required to get a TUP for that event or a special event, even though it's on private property?
For private property, it's TUP if there's 3 or more. If they do the 2, it would be considered an accessory use likely, because I'm assuming it'd be in downtown zoning district to be, yes. We thought of that too, because we just did an employee one for food trucks over at Light Park. It's like, okay, in that case, if they had 3, they would, that's public property, that would probably go through the special events permit process.
So on private property, if as long as it's 2, it does, what?
That
If
would be
it's 2 or less,
2 or less, it would just be allowed. If it's 3 or more, they would get a TUP.
That's a preview. At a preview parcel.
We also selected 3 based off of some of the other codes that we were using as models. Economowoc has a pretty good mobile food. It's a concise piece of their code. 3 seems like the lucky number across the board. If we want to increase or decrease that, I'm sure that we could be able to do that as well.
What is the fee for TUP? Is there a fee? or
No. 25? It's 25. I do like one a year, so sorry.
Is that, I mean, having 3 or more. Changing that classification to a rally and having that, does that affect anyone in town at this point? I'm just trying to think of where there's more than ever 2 trucks parked. I can't, this Riverside Ballroom, I feel like there's only ever 2 there.
No, they had three.
Do
or
they have
four
3?
before.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's sort of the thing, we wanna make sure that because with the TUP, we have the time requirement that you can see here. No more than 3 consecutive days for 36 total days within a calendar year. So we wanna make sure that if somebody is using their property as a food court, that they apply as a food court. Making sure that those provisions are in place. You have the parking available for this, you have a bathroom available for this, those sorts of things. Yes.
Okay,
So interesting, because I think when people go to food court, we don't need a bathroom. We just want to go there, but I'm sorry, food truck, but if you go to food court, it's a permanent structure where you go and sit, eat, congregate, have fun.
Mhm.
So you would need a bathroom.
Yes.
Is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Yes, the idea is that this would be an actual place to congregate versus I'm grabbing food and I'm going home for minutes.
It's a destination.
Yes.
take a
Yes.
Like I think they have those, like in Milwaukee, where the food trucks are the food trucks, that's the food truck court.
Yep. A lot of different places have them.
Yeah.
Something else to mention also is that within Wisconsin, mobile food establishments can't have their own liquor licenses because they're mobile.
They're mobile.
And if somebody did want to establish a court with alcohol, they can definitely do that. So that could either be done by expanding their existing liquor license premise. That could be done by establishing, like if they made their building a bar and got a liquor license for that bar. So it could have, any of these could have alcohol associated with them, that would all be done through the clerk's office as their existing things are. We don't have
They have
it.
to be a permanent structure in the court.
Yes.
It'd be mobile.
Be mobile, gotta be. I just keep thinking of like a concession stand that you would find at a high school football game, but it wouldn't obviously be there because why would they sell liquor there? But like that
Yeah.
type of a building would be
Right,
something
like
that
the
they would
little-
have.
salt shit.
Yeah.
Alright,
Menard shit.
Motion to approve as recommended.
Second.
Second.
What? Alright, motion by Commissioner Rybinski and second by Commissioner Fullwilder. Do we have any further discussion?
The fencing thing is a little weird to me, but if you guys are comfortable with it, then I am.
What is weird to you? What can I walk?
I don't know, it feels. Fencing is not required but encouraged. Well, what are we encouraging in that case? Fencing in period, or it just feels a bit vague.
I think that we did that on purpose because we don't know how big these sites are going to be. Because when we're thinking of the Charlton, like that should be fenced in. It's a small area, it's downtown, it helps to enclose that as more of a permanent use.
Right.
Versus when they're open, it's like, is this here all the time? When is it actually open? But somebody could have an acre site, be like, I want to put a food court here. Okay, but are we gonna make them fence the whole area? Would they only fence in a portion of the area? Would it be just around the liquor? You know, we don't really know what we're gonna get with these. And I definitely believe that this will be one of the sections that we probably come back to amend in about a year to see, did we get applications? What were they looking
Right.
for? So that's why it does feel a little vague. And, you know, we usually don't put, if we have land use development standards, we're not encouraging them to do anything. We're telling them what they are. But in this case, we wanted to say, if you're gonna do a fence, it has to be done this way. You have to do this
Okay.
step back. But forcing people to do a fence feels a little bit like overreach,
Yeah,
since we don't know how it'll look.
No, this is applying to all zoning districts where this would be in, but the code is going back to residential zoning.
Mhm.
And the biggest difference with that is on the front yard setback, the highest you can be able to sell a fence is 3 feet. if we're talking in downtown and there were other established buildings, you could go as high as 6 feet with a solid fence.
Mm.
Which we're trying to avoid that or being closed, absolutely.
Yes. Certainly don't want that.
We want visibility into this.
Right.
So people know this is an open
Right.
place to.
Okay.
And this is the first time we've had codes like this, and so this is kind of like our starting point.
Yes.
In a year, you'll figure out, well, this really didn't work for us, and this did, and.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I even wrote that into the code, or staff report, you know, when we put new things in the code. We gotta test it out. We won't really know until we know. These seem to be the top of mind things that we could all think of. There might be things that come to your mind that you're thinking of that you would think, oh, that should be added in here. You know, we wanna just make sure we have it established based on what we already know could happen, but then know that we're not gonna get it 100% right. Some things are going to be adjusted, I'm sure.
Depends, do we have anyone that's negatively impacted?
None of these are established yet, so no.
Okay, so we do have a motion by Commissioner Vinsky and a second by Commissioner Colwasser. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead with the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then that will go forward in the city council for March 3rd. All right, moving on to item number 5, which is a public hearing. This is a public hearing on amendments to section 44-1580J of the Green Bay Municipal Code, chapter 44, related to short-term rentals.
Hey, Chair. So looking at here is some amendments to the short-term rental code, and so recall, this came in front of this board back in fall of last year, and then in front of the city council, to where there were, at that point, there were 3 main points that were put forward at that point. One being 180-day cap, 2 being a 6-month overall standard as proposed. Sorry, it's considered as 180, and then a 6-day minimum for a property, and then 3 was looking to work with the state on bringing forth some legislation that could allow for municipalities to have more input into their own code. So we're looking at the 2050 comprehensive plan. I've highlighted here in some separations as to what can be done and what can't necessarily be done. So with one, working with state legislatures to allow for greater regulation on STRs. That's where a resolution by the Common Council was put forth, requesting for some more leeway for municipalities to tackle this beyond the restriction that the state has. The next being set a cap on short-term rentals and establishing the number of per year that a property can be rented out. The council took it on. It was settled at that point. The 180 Mystics was not advanced. So we're not gonna address that right now. I think it was agreed in subject reform, just generally speaking, that if the state gave more leeway, that the city should re-examine those type of things, but the state does not. So until it happens with the legislature and then the city gets some authority power to do some more revisions to short-term rentals, essentially, for the moment, those ideas are not present. So 4th and 5th, continuing to update and modernize the service portal for reporting issues related to SDRs and collaborating with rental platforms to ensure proper registration compliance. That's where we think some of the things that are being brought forth here in the SDR updates, looking to address. And finally, one's a bit of a very focus area, looking down over at the properties done by Lambo to capitalize on redevelopment and that kind of, but we're not addressing that to the long, so the code here for the entire city, but just wanted to note, those are the 6 points of the comprehensive plan for us to try to address with short-term rentals. So next slide, please. So I want to go forth with the different changes that are being proposed to the SDR code. So the existing code is chapter 44 -1580 sub I. And so we are looking to add in some different amendments that is trying to be cognizant of the different folks who have brought their voices to the table over the past few months. So staff has been working with amongst ourselves and talking to different folks in the community, the short-term rental alliance, concerned neighbors, people who have spoken their mind on the subject, both here at Plan Commission, Common Council, and after here in winter, about what can we do to shore up the short-term rental code. And so I'll go a bit down one by one through each individual amendment that is proposed. And to start out with, the code is trying to address what is needed prior to rental. And so some language has been added that the owner or operator shall prepare and maintain house rules applicable to all guests. So as we speak right now, people are required to have house rules. There's something new about that. But what this code is now addressing is that all house rules should also include, at a minimum, parking requirements and any on-street parking restrictions, noise requirements, including applicable nighttime hours established by the code, and contact information for the designated local contact person. The house rules shall be posted in a conspicuous location within the dwelling, including but not limited to the main entrance or the common living area, and provided to all guests prior to or at commencement of the rental period. So right now with the house rules, yeah, they're on your Airbnb or Vrbo. They're posted, but when it comes to city staff reviewing it, whatever your house rules are, you say, okay, you have this lease agreement, if you will, great, checked off, that's fine. These new updates say you need to, at a minimum, also have these big issues like parking, on-street parking, noise requirements, and contact info for local designated contact person, a part of your house rules as well. Obviously, you can go beyond that. And what was noted in your packet was an example of house rules for one of the local SDR folks who have things like no dogs allowed. Our code wouldn't address that. That's not happening, but that's their house rule. They're adding on different rules. But as noted from a lot of the conversation that was had amongst different groups, that these parts of the code should really be addressed in the house rules themselves. So next piece. So for parking requirements, it's noting the off-street parking limited to legal parking areas. Some sort of notation about that, that there's no parking on the grass, except for during the Lambo events when you can park on the grass for the city. Noting that the on-street parking restrictions, that there's no overnight parking on city streets between 3 and 5, or if there's any sort of local restriction on your street. So let's just say you have an SDR on Main Street, there's no parking on Main Street, or maybe on the, one side of your road happens to not have 2-hour parking, things of that sort. If it exists for your area, you note that in the house rules. Noting the noise requirements that the rules established by municipal code means between 10 and 7, the noise ordinance is in effect. And that having on the house rule itself, your actual designated local contact person is easily seen for folks. And once again, so this is, you can have more rules if you're an SDR person, but these are just the minimum. And to note, if you have extra rules here for a group, like going back to the idea of dogs, there's nothing in the code saying you can't have a dog at your rental. So if somebody were to show up to a property that said no dogs allowed, and a person brought a dog with them, this would not be enforced by ordinance. It's just, that's your house rules. It's a matter that has to be discussed between the renter and the property owner, but it wouldn't be a violation of code in that regard. The next slide, please. One of the amendments that were then added to was additions to what you need prior to rental. And one of those that is the onus on the city is that the city shall maintain a GIS STR map that includes at a minimum the permit holder, date of which the permit was issued, the street address, and the email address for the permit holder or their local contact. So we don't have, if you go to the city website, you will see some different tools for GIS. You're going to see a GIS portal. What you're seeing down here is just a screenshot of what you might see. Where that will actually fit into the, if there'll be a dedicated page that just says this is STRs, or it happens to be part of a scroll down, we'll see where that actually goes to at this point, but what to expect if you were to approve this and gets approved by city council is that the database will be into a place to where the public can go and see, okay, there are SDRs at these locations. This is the basic information that you would see regarding each individual property. Next. This is just some shoring up language, but it's to know that incomplete applications shall be rejected. That completed applications shall be delivered to the director of the community and economic development or the designee for review. It's just boilerplate language that's been added onto it for clarity. Next. Okay, so with the application itself, there's a few more steps are put forth for the application. So to be concluded with the STRP application with the city, the two of the following have been added, but not limited to this. So for certain, you'll need it, we're gonna add on that you need to note the number of bedrooms available and the number of off-street parking spots available at your house. Okay. We're relying on you that you're saying the correct information being put forth. I'll give it for example though. Let's just say you happen to be on a parcel that is a 700 square foot property, or sorry, building on a 3,000 square foot lot. And you say, I have 7 bedrooms and 7 parking spots. You don't. You don't have that. So we can tell that that's the case. It's a check to see what's happening, but to note for our inspection crew, Brown County Health Department goes and inspects these homes initially to see are they up to code to meet health department requirements. And they're seeing, okay, does this actually make sense? So we're putting this on there as a guideline, but it's not as though an inspector's going to go to each and every house to go, I'm counting exactly this many bedrooms on a house. It's a guideline to try to give us a good indication, but it's simple as that though. In addition, the untypical application fee and proof of insurance and documentation that's required back with the first part of this code. The owner or operator has to register with the city's alert program for police calls and inspection complaints. The owner or operator will receive an email notification within 24 hours after police have responded to the address, or will receive email notification of a potential inspection issue at their property as soon as a complaint is made with the city. So right now, if you are just a typical landlord kind of situation, you're renting out a house or multiple properties, you can sign up for this city alert program to note if there are issues happening with your property, such as a police call or an inspection. That way, you can't be on your end going, I didn't know this was happening at my property. You can know this is actually something that's been addressed by city staff. What is being required is if you're a new applicant, you have to be a part of this program. There is a fee for it for most people. All I said, it'd be waived in this case with your just typical registration fees. You're already paying a high amount to have your SDR permit, so not advocating to add on an additional fee to that. But anybody who's an SDR permit holder would have to be a part of this program to note other issues like police calls or potential inspection issues. Next. This is another just caveat in that part, noting that if all application material that is submitted has to be complete. If it's not complete, then it will be deemed not completed and rejected. Just noting that that's the case. So additionally, short-term rental permits granted by the city are subject to review on a yearly basis. During renewal, SDR applications denied by planning staff may be appealed to the planning commission and common council. There hasn't been language in the code addressing this if there was a denied application. To my knowledge, this has not happened where we've outright denied somebody. There's been incomplete applications. And we've helped folks along to get it to where you actually get to a yes. The state legislation essentially states if you are a residential property, you can apply to become an SDRP. In theory, somebody could say, I want to change my industrial use. I want to apply for it. We as staff would say, no, you can't. They still have to have a way to pursue if they want to have some sort of action on that. If you come to this body, this is a hypothetical that don't really see happening, but it's adding the language in that if we were to not outright deny an application, it would come through to the plan commission and common council. Don't really see it happening, but it's noting it to the language itself. So next. All right, so this is all brand new code language here, and it's actually putting in some teeth as to what enforcement means. And potential revocation of a short-term rental permit. The 10-second synopsis of this is essentially, if there are issues, you'll come forward to the city, there'll be a meeting, take corrective actions. If you don't, you can have your permit revoked, and then you can come back here to plan commission and challenge that if you feel like if the city's wrong you somehow. I'll go through step by step all the different parts of this, but that's over the course of the next 5-10 minutes what this is about. It's giving some actual guidelines as to how enforcement, corrections, revocation, suspension actually work. So the city may take enforcement action against an SDR permit for any of the following: failure to comply with any provision of the chapter, failure to comply with any condition of an SDR permit, or operation of an SDR rental in a manner that is constitutes a public nuisance. So we already have our public nuisance code. It's going through that as far as a nuisance, going back to chapter 24. And so that's the ways it's come about. So it's at the discretion of the city to decide, okay, what is actually a real hefty issue, or what is the actual strike? Because there is some talks about having a 3-strike policy. So for instance, one of the things that you have to do on a property is you have to put your placard up out on the front of your property. Okay. Let's just say it's not there. Is that reason to really revoke an SDR? Generally speaking, no. Now, does this keep on happening over and over and over again? Maybe at that point, that's where we need to actually have some corrective meetings about this. Is there a situation with a property where there is there's a rager that happens that just involves illicit drug use and sexual assault, just really terrible things? That's a strike where it's come back, let's talk about this right now. So it's trying to give some leeway and discretion as to what does it mean to come back for corrective measures for a property. And so with that, you come back for a corrective meeting, a correction meeting could be required prior to initiating a formal hearing for suspension or revocation of an SDR. The city shall require the permit holder or their designee to attend a corrective meeting. That's pretty similar to what has been done for nuisance properties as well. So we're trying to take that existing formula and trying to apply it here to SDRs. So the correction meeting shall be scheduled within a reasonable amount of time with a written or electronic notice provided to the permit holder, and shall be conducted by the police department with participation by other city departments as deemed appropriate. So what is the purpose of the meeting itself? It's to review what the documented violations are or nuisance activity. To get to this point, we actually have to have some documented cases where something is happening. It's not just a matter of, I heard some loud noise at 11 o'clock at night, but it wasn't documented. It has to be documented cases that could be adjudicated. 2, educate the permit holder regarding applicable requirements. 3, IED corrective actions to prevent future violations. And 4, establish expectations for ongoing compliance. The goal of this is not to say we want to just take away your permit for you right away. It's okay, you went in this, you're probably going in this with the idea and expectation of, I want to have a business, I want this to succeed. It may not be, if we're at this point right here, it's not succeeding, that is helped in a way that's fulfilling the neighbors, because there's been some issues. What can be done to make this STRP work for the context of the neighborhood and for you personally going in the future? So what items to be established? So the permit holder or the designee shall attend the meeting in person. Better to attend a scheduled correction meeting without good cause shall constitute a violation of the chapter. So following the correction meeting, the police department may require the permit holder to submit and implement a written corrective action plan that's similar to what's done for nuisance properties. The corrective action plan may include, but it is not limited to, modification or enhanced enforcement of house rules, improve local contact or on-site management practices, guest screening measures or monitoring, and any other reasonable measures necessary to prevent nuisance activity. So, okay, something didn't work here. Let's identify the problems. How can we fix this to make things better, to actually have this SDR work well in the neighborhood? So then comes the actual suspension or revocation. If after a corrective meeting, the permit holder fails to implement required corrective actions, continues to violate this chapter, or continues to operate an SDR in a way that it constitutes a nuisance activity or a public nuisance, the city may initiate proceedings to suspend or revoke the STRP. The grounds for suspension or revocation would be repeated or continued violations of the chapter, failure to comply with the corrective action plan, operating the SDR in a manner that constitutes a nuisance activity, violations of applicable provisions of the code, including noise, disorderly conduct, or parking, and the operation of the SDR presents a threat to public health, safety, or welfare. So legally saying, hey, this is some ways that would be grounds for suspension or revocation. So one last part of the hearing and due process, no SDR permit shall be suspended or revoked without written notice and an opportunity for a hearing in front of the planning commission. So you got your first notice. You said, hey, this isn't working. We do a correction plan. You go back in operations, correction plan doesn't seem to work. They have never, we can say, no, it's revoked. They have an opportunity to come back to this board and say, this is why this can still keep on going. I am meeting the criteria of the short-term rental conditions and argue that case to this board. The notice shall state grounds for the proposed suspension or revocation and shall inform the permit holder of the time and matter of the hearing of the plan commission. And then election not to be governed by statute, Wisconsin statute chapter 68, having established procedure for administrative review of municipal determinations, the city of Green Bay elects not to be governed by Wisconsin statute 68 in its entirety. So you can come back here for due process to argue that it should be revoked. Finally, okay, either they didn't come back here and it's been revoked, or they came here and plan commission said no, grounds to be revoked. What happens? Upon revocation, the SDR permit holder shall immediately cease operation of the property in question. The property shall not be advertised, offered, or used as an SDR during the revocation period. A permit holder whose property or properties have been revoked shall not be eligible to reapply for an SDR permit on the same property or properties for a period not less than 12 months from the date of revocation, unless otherwise determined by the Common Council. So if you get revoked at 1234 Main Street, you can't come back for an SDR permit for at least 12 months on that property. So that's a lot of meat and potatoes as to revocation, but I would suggest that the main parts of this would be, okay, we're adding in some other common sense ideas that can address some of the issues that neighbors have had when it comes to SDRs and their intensity on sites. And then noting, okay, what is the formal process to actually have somebody come through if we need to go down this road for revocation with individual permits.
Okay. All right, so now with this public hearing, we're looking to hear from anyone who'd like to speak on this item.
State.
Alder Heenfus, District 12, 525 Antelope Trail, Green Bay. I've been working with the team, and you all and we all at the council listened to many, many hours of testimony regarding the short-term rentals. And I think that the changes, that are being recommended are good changes. The creation of the Short-Term Rental Alliance is absolutely outstanding, but one is legal and one is not. And what I mean by that, an ordinance is legal and police can give tickets and so on and so forth, whereas the policies and what short-term rental people or the owners put within there is up to them. So that is not guaranteed, meaning they can decide not to follow it. And of course, we can go through this whole process. The couple things that we heard from the people that are not in here, and I don't know if this is your committee that addresses this or not, but I'm going to, you got to hear me out. One, in the city of Green Bay, if you own a house or if you live in an apartment, the number of cars you own are required to be in the driveway at night according to the law, correct? They cannot be outside all night, overnight. They have to be in your driveway. You can't leave your car out overnight in the city of Green Bay. Okay? So with the short-term rentals, I am recommending we put within the ordinance the number of cars based on the licensure that we give, meaning how many cars fit in the driveway, that's how many cars should be allowed at the short-term rental. And I say this because the average number of people that live in a home, that a homeowner in Green Bay, from what I've been told in the city of Green Bay, is two. Two people. Okay? In my district, I have 3 huge party houses. And one of them has cars all over. They have a driveway that fits 8 cars. Granted, the neighbors would love to not have 8 cars, but if they could limit it to 8 cars, they would be happy. They live in this neighborhood. They pay taxes in this neighborhood. It's a gorgeous neighborhood. They pay to live in the neighborhood, but every week, especially starting in May, all the way through September and October, there is constant turnover of 20 people in and out, in and out, in and out. And I think our ordinance needs to make it clear that number of parking spots that are within the driveway, that's the number of parking spots that should be allowed for the short-term rental. And I don't think I would have any concerns from, the people that own them. I think it just, it says the city is thinking about the residents. The other thing is on our application, we should know what the occupancy is. Okay? We don't ask what is the occupancy, what are you going to rent this house for? How many people? Where I guess when you buy a house, they don't ask you how many are moving in. But when it's a rental, and if we do not want visitors, we need to have people signing in. And again, it's a short-term rental. So we know how many people should be there, because the number of visitors, we've had weddings where they've asked the neighbors to stay in, where they've asked them to keep their dogs in. Remember, our neighborhoods are the heart of our city, and the people that own property here and live in those neighborhoods, we got to respect. So I'm just asking, and then along with the posting of the rules, one big thing the neighbors brought up is they want to know when a new short-term rental is coming into their neighborhood. That is not something that we've solved. So notification was a big deal from the people. I don't know that you guys handle that, but I know you do from a cars and an occupancy from a planning perspective. So, and I don't see why we can't add that to our application, but thank you all for your consideration, all your time. I appreciate it.
Hi, good evening, Plan Commission. My name is Mark Danon. I own a property management company for short-term rentals, and I'm also one of the on the leadership team of the Short-Term Rental Alliance. I wanted to first say thank you to the staff that have invited the Short-Term Rental Alliance leadership team to sit down over the last month and be a part of these discussions in terms of finding this path forward that is, both fair and meets the needs of the community as well as neighbors, etc. And so I think what was presented to you exemplifies everything that had been brought up in all of these very long meetings over the last couple of months, and really really puts forward a plan to solve for some of the major concerns that were brought up and really try to prevent things from going sideways. So I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to be a part of that. I think what you have in front of you is fair, and I do think it will have very actionable items for people to do the right thing. As an alliance, we will be there to try to help coach and advise new short-term rental owners and operators to do better, right? We all want to do better. We want to do the right thing. We want to be good neighbors in the city of Green Bay. So even what Alder Hafis had brought up in terms of parking and occupancy, no, those are absolutely not deal breakers. We want to do the right thing. In fact, one of the house rules that I have, and I'm sure most of my peers have, is there is no parking on the city streets overnight. If you do, I expect to get ticketed or towed. So we expect that our guests would park their cars in driveways, and if they don't, they're kind of taking matters in their own hands. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you.
Can you state your address for the record?
Sorry, 825 Spring Hills Court in Deep. Yep.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Let the record reflect that no one else came forward and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to the corresponding actionable item, item number 6. Consideration with possible action on amendments to section 44-1580J of the Green Bay Municipal Code, chapter 44, related to short-term rentals.
Thank you, Chair. So to address some of Alder Hafis's questions and concerns. So what has been noted with the application is the requirement to note the amount of off-street parking spaces available on a property. We're relying on the folks to note this is what we have, and we're seeing if there's something that looks to be anomaly when it comes to these properties. We're not looking for a land survey to know, do you have exactly, say, 45 feet of length? So you can establish a 15-foot long parking stall inside your driveway. Essentially, what kind of garage stalls do you have? What can you park for tandem parking outside of it? The code requires you to have, when it comes to 1 and 2 families, 1 interior space, and 1 extra space, could be interior or exterior. If you're downtown, it requires just 1 parking stall. And if you're in a multifamily facility, it's 1 parking stall per unit and then 1 visitor stall for every 4 units. So do you feel it's being established in that way? To note, the folks who are applying are putting down the amount of vehicles they have. As far as occupancy goes, so as noted, asking for the amount of bedrooms at a facility. When it comes to building code, it's based off of the amount of cubic square footage that a sleeping area provides. Your bedroom, could be a living room on a cot. And it's different depending on if you're an adult or a child. So occupancy changes for sleeping arrangements. when it comes to a house, this is just a normal rental or an owner occupied home. We don't request what is the occupancy of a home itself at these parcels, so. That's where, it's trying to find that balance of what can truly be enforced as far as noting how many bedrooms do you happen to have, and if it's seen that, hey, you have 1 or 2 bedrooms and you look on the STR on Airbnb and they say sleeps 24, that's a red flag for the inspection folks to say that doesn't really do this well. But frankly, if you're a place that happens to have 7 or 8 bedrooms, you probably can sleep 24 in a place like that. This. And then as far as posting of the new rules posting the rules and notifying neighbors of the addition of a short-term rental. That's where when talking over as far as what it meant for notifications, I think in part was the addition of on the GIS mapping, that if you are a part of the public, you can see, okay, there are new SDRs in the neighborhood. Keep in mind for folks, just in general, that the period lasts until June 30th, renews on July 1st. So especially with Packer season context coming in for a lot of places, that's when you happen to see a lot of new properties coming on board. Speaking now, it does happen throughout the year. There have been people who have requested SDR permits here during the winter months, but it's much less than you would during the summertime. So forgive me on the count, but we're around 500 or so permits to put it out to. When we have these discussions here, when it comes to things like our first agenda item here, we put out mailers of the department to 400 people. That does take, or sorry, folks within 400 feet of the property. That does take time and resources to put it out to just that one. If we're talking 500 plus different units, as far as notifying a certain area, we felt that TV services and the website was the most manageable way to tell the public, like, yes, there's an SDR in this area, rather than mailing out to folks within a certain distance and trying to maintain that. So it was thought of. I think their ideas that still they have merit. We've been thinking about it and debating it back and forth, but this is what we're looking to present to you for debate. And staff is recommending approval of the amendment to you if you need the packet.
So the whole process, they come back to us,
Yes.
not the Board of Appeals.
No. Not the Board of Appeals.
They come back to us.
Yes.
So they're appealing to not a board.
Board of Appeals is, when it comes to what their purview is, they are looking at quantitative numbers throughout the code. So you do not go to the Board of Appeals for a use function at Board of Appeals.
I was just thinking more of like a hardship, because now you've got a property and maybe they don't live in the area, now that's a hardship, so that's why I was thinking. Board of
Okay.
Appeals.
No, I don't know how many folks will actually come forward and say, I need to appeal this based off of, if we're to the point where city is one doing its first corrective action, there is a meeting. And then you go on to the corrective actions were not followed through. And now we're at another point where we're actually saying, okay, it's revoked or suspended. We're at that point, how many folks say, this didn't happen? Because we're coming forth with actual evidence on these things to say, this actually happened. But this is giving those folks due process to take it somewhere, rather than it just being, well, city staff said so, it's now over. So it had to go to somebody. And when discussing like, where should this go to? Yeah, we felt that this staff was the most qualified for them.
So question, and I know we said through 10, 12, 30 hours this. And it seems like this is the root of this, the foundation is because you have 3 or 4 extreme party houses. What is the recourse for those neighbors that continue to have issues with these 3 or 4 that's causing all of these recommendations and accommodations for everyone else, but it's really 3, 4, 5 bad seeds? What do the neighbors have? What are those recourses for those neighbors? First question, I have another one.
Sure. So it's requiring the idea of putting some adjudicated action on the site to where it's not just hearsay, it's not just, I heard something at night, but there's actual action taken either by police staff or by inspection staff on a property to where it's like, yep, we actually have an action that's coming through, a noise violation that was documented and recorded by the police of the property. Or perhaps an inspection issue here with or the park department with where cars may be parked, say, on lawns or overnight, things of that sort. It still is at the discretion, like I said, of staff as to what counts or how we would take this forth, because I'll give the low example of, hey, I didn't see a placard on the front of the property, on the front part of the property. The tape got less adhesive. It fell down. One of the, for some reason it's off. We don't feel like that should be a reason to say, you got to come in now for corrective measures. It still is a staff calling that to feel as to, okay, do we need to come forth and take this here? So there is discretion with staff as to what would constitute coming forth with corrective measures.
Does the alert program alert staff that there was a violation or issue? How is staff notified from?
Right, that's a good question. So we're still working with IT, with our folks who,
Because that was an issue that came up.
yep. Because there has to be the communication that would be for, say, a police department, and mind you, for the police department's role, they don't want to look at this through the lens of being, this is an STR. This is a property like any other property. They can't say,
That's a
okay,
nuisance. That's
Yeah,
something that's going
yep.
on.
it's like anybody else. So they wouldn't be having a different standard because they happen to be an STR. But on our end, as far as noting like, did something happen? Yes, from working with our IT staff, we're trying to find ways that would, or our inspection staff would be working with the SDRs to know, okay, it happened that say 2 properties this past month had an issue. Now we know that and we can review, okay, is this something that would be worthy of bringing in for corrective measures at that point.
And my last thing, I know Lisa. While you were sitting here talking, I did a decision tree. It's a fake one. It might be something great. I drew it. It might be something great to do at some point when staff has time to do a decision tree, so someone at a glance could look and see how this process works.
Okay.
This is a FYI.
So yeah, you're talking about as far as the police and the city and the communication there, because when you get a nuisance, the police just send you that notice. I mean, there's no fluffy thing from the city like, hey, let's have a nice little talk. It's like,
But no, would be some kind
well, no, but that's what I'm saying is like how it'd be like, oh, well, what do you say to the police at that point? Like, oh, well, sorry, this is a short-term rental. There's a process we go through the city too. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how we can say like, hold off. If you're actually getting calls to the police, like how do you stop that process and work through this process? Does that make any sense?
You say it again?
Yeah.
I think it's the same people and almost the same process. If this were a rental, if this were a straight 30-day rental.
I have a straight rental and I got a nuisance letter and they were very, and I said, I
come to
don't.
this meeting at this date and we need to talk because we got some issues.
Well, I just know it was basically, they made me aware, but I said, this won't happen again, and it didn't happen again.
Exactly. And I think this is the same process, but it's with short-term rentals. It's the police inspection, it's the same team really
Right,
looking at it. I mean, the police are doing their job, right? But they're providing the data to this group of people that are going, okay, there's a problem here. We need to get this owner in. You bring the owner and you go through the whole same corrective process, really. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna screen your applicants better, those types of things, right?
right.
And then the difference though is that, you as a landlord on a longer rental could start getting billed for police calls. Could receive citations, could do some, the short-term rental, you could issue your permit or your license.
Okay, so that's the difference. You just end up losing that and then, okay. But there has to, they're
I'm
gonna
seeing
figure
it
out
very
some kind of
similar, yep.
communication between the police and between, okay, all
Absolutely.
right.
Yep.
Question. So I want to say thank you, staff and all those who put this together. I was one of the 3 strikes people, and I think it's covered. There's a process. people who are gonna review the process, namely us, the council, are identified. And I had questions, and it was funny, Alder Hinkles came up. First words out of her mouth took me like an hour to figure out with discussions with staff. If there's law that the police department follows, and then there's the guidelines in the rental. And the two don't really meet. Okay, so, because I was thinking, how are the police officers who are coming up know what is in the law and what the corrective actions in the plan, if it's been called up, how are they gonna know? Because I was concerned they may not take the right information down to later use in this process. And really, if the police department does their job and just looks at the law, the rest will kind of follow. I think this is all relevant. The one thing, I always look at things as wide open. Is it necessary to go through this process if there's a very egregious happening? Okay, and I don't think that, I mean, someone's murdered or, that type of. I don't think we have to go through that now, but there's that end of it. And then what about someone who's not a rental owner, but lives nearby, and they just like to nitpick? And actually, the renter and the property owner and the renter, those who rent, are doing fine. But they know this is a short-term rental and they're communicating all the time. How do we deal with that? I mean, so that's up the other end. But I think that stuff we'll learn. I guess we don't need everything right now. I think the major points are here. And we just gotta, I guess it would be good, having gone through new, laws for the city. We learn a lot in the first year or two, because we've already revised some of those major things that have come through council. And it would be good if someone's, I'm sure you will, but someone should have a job of picking these things we learn. Because I think this will pass, it should pass. And let's make it better. But this is a very good start, because one of the things I heard from one of my friends who's a short-term rent owner, he was concerned that they were going to be treated differently than long-term rental. And when I heard, no, we're kind of using the same process, that made me feel better. So I'll be able to talk to them. And that, I think they'll settle down.
Yeah.
So bottom line, I'm all for this process. I'm going to vote for it, send it to council. So thank you. Thank everybody involved.
I'll address the second part of that, and I'll let Attorney Wood take on the first part of that as far as if it got to a murder. Adjudication and substantiation matters. So if you got somebody who is just nitpicking and they're saying, being a tattletale, I don't like this, I want this gone. We actually have to have something from either police or inspection staff where it is known we have a documented case with this to move forward. And I will note our staff, especially Mike Botot, who is with looking at short-term rentals, has done a fantastic job as far as talking to both property owners and folks who have had complaints, explaining the rules as far as how to make things better and to know, get some sunshine as to these are the rules on our property. And in having conversations with him since he's begun the position over a year ago, he has said in having communication with people who might be a bit more communicative to him on a regular basis, that he's found some common ground as far as saying, okay, if there happens to be something where it really is, it's going past the ordinance, we need to know, let us know, but these are giving some sunshine as to what the rules are. So I think there's been progress with or without this update to the code that I think will just keep on getting better, but I'll take the other end of the spectrum. It's pretty quick.
Under chronic nuisance ordinance, they talk about qualifying. So it's actually defined as a qualifying fine, so kind of get, it's the same thing with landlords, right? If you have somebody who doesn't like the rental property, they could be calling things as. And I was just gonna say, with regards to that egregious thing happening, you know, there's also an assumption, as with landlords, that sometimes you catch a bad tenant, or you have a bad rental situation where that happens. Like with something really bad happens one time, bring the landlords in and you bring the short-term rental owners in. And you talk with them, they make all the moves to do the right thing after that point, because this happened in their unit. And then it's better, and we don't have to proceed. If they don't, and ignore you, and they don't think it's big, then you proceed forward. So, the harsher action. Because I mean, I just want to say that sometimes bad things happen to good landlords. You know, you don't, but.
Yeah, and I was, you said nitpicking, and I was thinking if it was even more meritless, if there are calling 911, that could be a misuse of 911 depending on the circumstances. So went a little bit further than what you were describing, that is, something that's available too. But then, we also did contemplate emergency situations. We do think that there's certain situations that we already have statutory and some ordinance, but can help us in some of those situations. So like, as far as the crime scene, I think that would be locked down. We won't be able to utilize that property anymore. Like, let's say it was old and dilapidated and unsafe for habitation, we look at our waste repair orders, to bring that up to code. We have a couple other tools right now that can address some of the emergency situations to kind of contemplate.
Right, so there's tools outside
Mhm.
that could come in if they are pertinent.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, great. Well, that's good to know.
So outside of the Packer season, do we really have a lot of properties that are an issue, or is there just like a small handful? Cause I'm just thinking, I'm in Facebook groups for Airbnb hosts that they're very strict about how many people are allowed in the property, and there are rules, the house rules are along that. So do we just really have, outside of obviously the Packer season, do we really have a bunch of properties that are really, we have issues with?
I do in my district, yes, year round,
Yes. I
big
think-
one, and it's the big ones. The issue is we don't have the ability to limit how many people can go into a home. So when you drop 20 people that come with 5 or 6 cars, many times more, slamming doors, and it's every 3 to 5 days. All summer, they got a pool, a couple of them have pools, music is blaring, and these are quiet residential areas, no duplexes, nothing. So, yeah, there's 3 big ones by me.
Good.
And I know Jennifer's got some,
I like duplexes. I don't think that's a foundational fallback. Disney on Ice, I saw a lot of people this week.
I've heard, the building pools are always,
Yeah.
my parents put a pool in their backyard in the 80s, and we have neighbors that will come over and yell at my children.
I think, like I went back to my earlier comment, it's 3 or 4 that's causing issues for every, quite honestly. Or maybe 5, honestly. I don't live on the system.
Okay,
Right?
do we have a motion?
I don't think we did.
I don't think so.
I'll give my 2 cents on it. I understand we're probably the most qualified body to take these on. I still don't know if we are qualified to take.
Yeah.
Legalize, people we lease wise, it's definitely not something we are competent in, that type of thing, so. If and when we do get to this point, because it's going to happen at some point. Staff needs to take additional steps to make sure that we are giving the right information, we're not being put into a bad position or situation when that time arises. Whatever that means, because I don't know what that means. We generally just don't do it this type of thing, so I understand it's gotta go somewhere. This is probably the most appropriate place, but I just challenge staff to make sure we have the resources available to our disposal to make a good decision. And with that, I will move to approve as.
Yeah, I was second.
I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
Alder Morgan. The reason some of us are here is tonight we had our protection policy meeting. We meet at 4 o'clock before you guys. And a lot of this stuff will work easy. But that might be a possibility if your committee isn't, your commission is not capable. We handle, for those of you who've never been to a PMP meeting, we handle disputes about the massage parlors, tavern license. Tonight we had someone appealing because their dog is being removed from the city because of it attacking people. The police come to every one of our meetings. There's always a lieutenant or some of the community policing officers. They present the evidence to us along with a member of the law department. So we're given information about how many times they've responded to, say, a bar because of how many times they had underage drinkers or violations like that. Same with the massage parlor. If they get complaints and they follow through and they do legal stuff like that. So it works real well with us because we have the police officers there, a supervisor that can give us the information and give us the evidence technically that we go by. And then we also have the legal departments at every one of these meetings. So I'm not saying we want to get the police more work because they don't have enough help as it is, but that is a possibility to consider if your commission couldn't handle it, something like a protection and policy committee might be something to look at into deciding who gets to get probation, get a permit, removal of a permit, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, my only other question was, we have older profit, so we had the massage establishments initially going through protection and policy, but we changed that. So they now will go through the zoning board of appeals, and I know that there was some conversations of maybe a new appeal board would really be beneficial, and now it feels like we might start dipping into that territory if we're gonna start asking those zoning board of appeal folks to do more, because they're doing the massage now, and this kind of seems like one of those as well. So maybe just something to consider, because I can understand the reason we shifted that is that so that we took council out of it, there was no bias, there was nothing. And that board is a completely unbiased board, and it feels like it would be beneficial for this type of action to also. So I know maybe not zoning board of appeals, but perhaps the creation of a brand new appellate board would be beneficial in the future. My only thoughts. I don't know if Attorney Wood, you wanted to add anything?
Yeah. You know, that is something that's been contemplated. We are working within in the now. So, given that this board is the body that does here change the zoning, we do think that it's appropriate that this would be the same body that would hear these type of deals. You know, to your point, Commissioner Miller, you will be brought up to speed. I have no doubt the staff will be able to present all the evidence to you, and that this body will be able to make a conclusion based on the evidence. But I certainly can appreciate that it's new, right? And you know, this is, also we point out that we're electing not to be governed by Chapter 68 as well. So that is something that's beneficial as well, that we're able to have that due process with this body. I am hearing from, you know, some orders, so I mean, I certainly hear that feedback, and we can talk about that some more, but that is where we are operating right now with what we have available. I think that's probably the most appropriate body. I can appreciate that maybe it doesn't feel 100% a lot.
And maybe the question is that we're not objecting to it, maybe Vice Chair Miller is not objecting to it, just make sure we have the training to make the.
We don't
best
make
educated
legal ramifications for the city kind of thing, but the short-term rental, I mean, they used to come through us. I don't know if you were still on the board when every single one had to come through us, so.
Yeah. And you know,
There you go.
We're better off than that.
Yeah.
And having been on the Board of Appeals, and I'm on the Protection and Policy Committee, and I'm on this thing. So I'm basically certain. I think everything makes sense what people said. I think because this is brand new, I think this is the place where we can learn. And I know if something's above our bailiwick, the staff will provide us with backup personnel to give testimony. So I know we're used to listening to all kinds of testimony on Planning Commission. I feel very comfortable Planning Commission is a place to be, especially during this first year, because then we can see where we may want to go in the future. But this is a good place to start this in my mind anyway. pivot from what it's worth.
And this could be a very neutral committee as well. I don't think any of us, most of us, don't have a skin in the game. Or any bias, ties that could be considered bias.
I'd also just note that you guys do make quasi judicial decisions all the time, and I'm happy to hear that you feel like that. It sounds like you're very comfortable doing that already. It's just that this would be a different type of decision making. So it's encouraging to really actually to hear that, because I think that shows that you're so well in tune with the process. But we certainly will do that training. Working.
Yeah, don't show up at my house questioning our decision.
I enjoy my free time too.
That will be feel bias. I think you have a motion.
We did, we have a motion
And I have a second.
Yeah. move.
as recommended.
Yeah.
As written. Do we have a second? Oh, we did. Okay. Excellent. Do we have any further discussion? All right, so we've got a motion by Vice Chair Miller, a second by Commissioner Daniels. All those in favor? Any opposed? And then that will move forward for City Council for March 3rd. Moving on to informational directors
All
report.
right, you have your, Vandy tracker, and I can tell you that if you always ask, about our rural property.
I do, that's my neighbor.
That's all.
We're working on the development agreement, so bringing it forward to March, meeting.
Oh, wow.
Three phases of development there, which is exciting. We'll also be releasing the housing study at the March 30th, so you guys want.
Make sure I say this.
We have a special RDA meeting tomorrow, to discuss the merge development, which is on Shipyard. I'm not the white building, but that's, we're gonna talk about that development. Timeline.
That looks, it looked like timeline changes. I didn't see anything else substantive in at least what's posted.
Yep, we're looking at some timeline changes, we want some provisions in there to make sure it starts. And continues. So she's gonna be. She's gonna, in, and then, she's gonna have a baby, and then she'll be out for a while, and then she'll be back. Which will be fun, so. Keep it real. So thank you.
For the record, what's your background? Could you give us like a?
No.
That's the
Right.
Any questions for me?
I don't think so.
All right.
All right, date of the next meeting, Monday, March 9th, 2026.
That may be getting canceled since nothing was held tonight, so we'll let you.
Great.
Okay. Good. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Vinsky, second by Vice Chair Miller. All those in favor?
Uh,
Good evening.
Cheryl, I have a question for you on your development.
That's the last time we